Imagine you're a surfer, right? You're out there scanning the horizon, looking for that fixed point to judge the next wave. But there just aren't any. The ocean itself, the currents, even the shoreline, it feels like it's all moving, constantly shifting, unpredictable. That feeling, navigating without any real anchors. Well, that's pretty much what many CEOs are experiencing right now, trying to steer their companies through today's global landscape. Welcome to The Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a really important report from McKinsey & Company. It's called How CEOs Are Responding to Geopolitical Uncertainty. Our mission here is to pull out the most vital insights, the key stuff from this expert analysis. And we're also looking at an accompanying study guide and briefing. The goal is to give you a clear, concise understanding of how global business leaders are actually, navigating these unpredictable currents. Whether you're prepping for a big meeting, maybe just trying to get your head around these huge global shifts we're seeing, or, maybe you're just intensely curious. This deep dive is your shortcut. It's about getting you well-informed quickly. We're going to uncover some surprising facts, I think, and definitely some interesting strategic moves that show how businesses are transforming really in real time. What's going to stand out to you about leading when the ground beneath your feet feels less like solid earth and, more like a shifting tide? We've seen geopolitical tensions, tariffs, these really complex trade negotiations. Sometimes it feels like they bring entire industries almost to a halt.
Yeah, but only for a while, right?
Exactly, only temporarily. Business leaders just can't afford paralysis. They have to analyze, they need to plan, and they absolutely have to act. Often with, let's face it, incomplete information. And our sources today, they bring together McKinsey experts from all sorts of different places, different industries. They're sharing what their clients are actually doing, what keeps them up at night, and maybe crucially, what they might be missing. Okay, let's start unpacking this. The report suggests CEOs haven't really faced this level of global economic and political volatility for about 35 years.
Yeah, think about that.
That's a whole generation of leaders without that direct firsthand experience of such a fundamentally unstable environment.
And what's truly fascinating, I think, is how much this challenges that sort of ingrained CEO mindset. Leaders are typically wired, push forward, make decisions, use clear parameters. But like one CEO put it, and this is brilliant, if you're a track athlete, you've got fixed points, firm ground, makes sense. But if you're operating now, it feels more like being a surfer.
Constantly adjusting. Constantly adjusting, exactly. Never quite finding that stable anchor. It demands a completely different way of thinking, a different approach.
So with all this instability, this constant flux, what does it really mean for the practical day-to-day decisions in the C-suite?
Well, that's the critical question, isn't it? How do you lead when the ground is literally shifting under your feet? It's that surfing scenario, as they call it. CEOs have to absorb and just make sense of massive changes, often contradictory ones.
Sorting the signal from the noise.
Precisely. Figuring out what's just noise versus what's a crucial signal. What needs action now versus what maybe you need to watch and wait on. And fundamentally, they need to build a really strong house view on which potential futures are, worth planning around.
Okay, so that's the broad uncertainty. But let's get more specific. What are the tangible worries, the things really keeping leaders awake at night?
A huge one, almost across the board, is supply chain vulnerability. You hear it everywhere. Companies in Asia, for example, they're acutely worried about how concentrated their supply chains are. We see this really sharply with rare earth materials. The geopolitical friction, particularly U.S.-China, is causing major constraints.
And what's the real-world impact of that? How does it actually hit companies?
Oh, it's severe. Some automakers, Japan, Korea, India, are already so affected by these shortages that they're actively considering scaling down production.
Wow.
Yeah. So for you, the listener, that's a direct hit. Whether you're a consumer waiting for a car or an investor watching the numbers, the ripple effects are real.
Okay, so the waters are turbulent. How are leaders actually adjusting? Are they all doing the same thing, or is it more varied?
Oh, not at all. It's quite varied. The report, and Ashutosh Padi talks about this, identifies two pretty distinct groups of leaders. One group sees this moment less as a threat and more as a huge opportunity.
An opportunity. How so?
To strategically reposition their whole company. For value creation, like for the next decade, they're actively rechecking key assumptions, especially any that are more than maybe 6 months old. They're rethinking how all these global changes affect everything: supply chains, customer footprints, the works.
That's a fascinating split. So one group is aggressively repositioning. What's the other group doing?
The other group is more cautious. They're essentially waiting for the fog to clear. They're hoping maybe new trade deals will settle or geopolitical alignments become clearer before they make any big, irreversible moves.
And which way is right?
Well, that often depends heavily on their industry, where their company is starting from, and frankly, their appetite for risk. There's no single answer.
Sven Smith uses this really interesting analogy, the microscope and the telescope view. Can you break that down?
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. The microscope view is about dealing with the immediate stuff, the here and now. Like a sudden tariff hike hits a key component, or you're managing inventory chaos because of shipping delays. That's the microscope.
Got it, the tactical stuff.
Exactly. But then there's the telescope level. That's the long-term future, where the world is, maybe quietly, investing trillions in these huge transformative technologies. AI, modular construction, e-commerce, robotics.
So the big challenge for you as a leader is juggling today's fires while still making sure you're investing in tomorrow's potentially massive shifts.
Precisely. And the key insight isn't just that you need both views. It's how the best leaders build resilience to shift dynamically between them, between the short-term tactics and the long-term strategy. It's about not getting so bogged down in the daily volatility that you miss the really big waves forming out there. Leaders have to consider this complex mix, right? Geopolitics, trade flows, tech breakthroughs, the energy transition, even demographics. It's all interconnected.
So beyond just waiting it out or diving in head first, what are some concrete, actionable things leaders are actually doing right now?
Shubham Singhal outlines 3 key steps that many are taking. First, they prioritize. Which geopolitical factors matter most for our specific business?
Right, makes sense.
If you're in semiconductors, export controls are obviously critical. If you make t-shirts, maybe less so, right?
Okay, prioritize. What's second?
Second, they use robust analytics. They model specific scenarios. What if this happens? What if that changes? And assess the potential impact. And third, they're putting in place event boards.
Event boards, what are those?
Basically, systems to track key developments, trade talks, tax legislation, watch lists, things like that. So they have pre-planned responses ready to go the minute something actually happens.
And it's not just internal strategy, right? What about engaging externally with governments, for instance?
Absolutely. That's a big shift. Cindy Levy notes many CEOs are stepping up their engagement in public policy. Some are even bringing in dedicated government relations specialists to get a more sophisticated, nuanced perspective.
So less passive waiting.
Much less passive. Some companies are engaging directly with Washington, for example, making their case for their investments, their impact, rather than just waiting for broad country-level trade deals to sort things out. It's definitely more proactive.
Okay, but these shifts aren't just about challenges. You mentioned opportunity. Where are we seeing new opportunities pop up on the global map?
Nelson Ferreira really highlights Latin America here. As U.S.-China trade patterns change, China's overcapacity, which used to be mainly in commodities, is now expected to flow more into big Latin American markets, like Brazil.
Affecting what kind of sectors?
Things like cars, electronics, which means, yes, tough competition for local producers there, but it's a major dynamic shift for the whole region.
Is there a flip side, though? A silver lining for other countries, maybe?
Absolutely. Mexico and Central America, they're seeing significant opportunities to replace some of China's imports to the U.S. market.
In what areas?
Particularly things like medical devices, electronic equipment. Costa Rica, for instance, is already a big producer for the U.S. and is actively looking at expanding. You really are seeing new trade corridors start to emerge. Latin American governments exploring stronger ties with India, with Japan.
And looking even broader, globally. Are there any sure bets for growth amid all this uncertainty?
Well, sure bets might be strong, but Cindy Levy points to what she calls strong tailwinds in a couple of areas. One is South-South trade. That's trade between developing nations. And the other is China-ASEAN trade. She describes these as pretty reliable areas for global companies to tap into for growth.
Interesting. So a pivot from just playing defense to maybe some more offensive, growth-focused moves.
Exactly.
We hear a lot about diversifying supply chains, onshoring. How does this term glocalization fit in? What exactly is it?
Nelson Ferreira explains glocalization. It's basically Indian factories producing for India, Chinese factories for China, U.S. factories for the U.S., and so on. It's a pretty fundamental shift away from relying on one single global manufacturing hub.
Towards what?
Towards having more vertically integrated operations within each major region.
That sounds like a good way to build resilience, shield yourself from tariffs and politics.
Precisely. It allows companies to insulate themselves somewhat from tariffs, navigate those complex geopolitical factors like how does your relationship with country X affect buying decisions in country Y, or even your social license to operate.
But is there a downside? Does it sacrifice efficiency?
That's the tension, absolutely. The trade-off is often higher costs, maybe less global scale efficiency, but the gain is significantly de-risked operations in what's clearly a very volatile world. It's a strategic choice.
For decades, the mantra for multinationals was global integration.
Right.
I mean, more and more interconnected. Is that model still holding up?
That's a core and very urgent question right now for boards and CEOs. Ziad Hera confirms this. The question is, can my company remain global? And if so, how? And what you're seeing is multinationals making these quite surgical moves, things like structural segmentation, setting up, say, separate tech stacks in a market like China, or ring-fencing R&D capabilities in geopolitically sensitive areas.
So getting much more deliberate, more surgical about where and how they operate globally.
Exactly. For U.S.-based multinationals, obviously the U.S. market is critical. But the biggest uncertainty is really their strategic posture towards China. And alongside that, how do they really capitalize on growth in India and the ASEAN region?
Right.
The report even suggests that India plus ASEAN over the next decade might eventually add up to something like 50% of the Chinese market size.
Wow, 50%. That's a huge potential shift in economic gravity.
A potentially massive shift, yes.
We've talked a lot about tariffs. They get the headlines. But what are some of the maybe under-the-radar concerns, the less obvious currents?
Ziad Haider talks about myopia here, a kind of short-sightedness. Leaders often focus, understandably, on the big, obvious things, what the report calls the three gray rhinos.
Which are?
U.S.-China competition, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the conflicts in the Middle East. Big, visible threats. But his point is, localized tensions can flare up really fast and disproportionately hit operations in specific areas that maybe weren't getting enough attention.
Okay, so beyond local flare-ups, what other economic factors besides tariffs are maybe being overlooked?
Several critical ones. Export controls, for instance. They're increasingly affecting access to essential things like chips, high-end tech. Then there's the trajectory of the U.S. dollar, always huge. Global energy security, and rising tensions around who controls critical infrastructure, ports, data networks, etc. Cindy Levy adds even broader economic impacts to watch, potential drops in consumer demand because of all the uncertainty, a general economic slowdown perhaps, and the long-term fiscal health of the U.S. economy. She points to signs of unsustainable deficit spending there too.
This all seems to lead towards a bigger shift. Sven Smith talks about the rise of the political economy. What does he mean by that?
Exactly. His observation is that business leaders, historically, really preferred politics and economics to be separate things, different spheres.
Keep them apart.
Yeah, keep them apart. But that's just less and less possible now. The lines are blurring dramatically. So the ability to understand and deal with both simultaneously is becoming a critical skill for every CEO. It means staying in closer, more sophisticated contact with governments, trying to predict, maybe even influence events as they unfold.
It almost sounds like every boardroom needs its own geopolitics radar now.
That's not far off, honestly.
And this convergence brings up another crucial point. How are geopolitics and cutting-edge tech, like AI, starting to intersect in ways that really change things for business?
Vasudhaj Pati explains this well. What's happening in geopolitics isn't just about trade deals anymore, not by a long shot. It's increasingly about national security, economic independence, and crucially, technological leadership.
Okay.
And this convergence is driving countries to think very seriously about developing their own sovereign cloud ecosystems, their own sovereign AI capabilities. They want to control their digital future, basically.
That's a powerful idea. Maybe a bit unsettling, too. This notion of tech itself becoming a key battleground for national sovereignty. How does that affect risk management for companies?
Well, the best firms are responding quite actively. They're creating really insightful geopolitical scenarios. They're meticulously modeling the potential economic fallout for their specific markets, their financials, and they're having mitigations ready, event-based triggers planned out.
So more than just reacting.
Much more. They're also implementing things like concentration limits on their operations. It's similar to how banks limit their loan exposure to certain regions or sectors, making sure they're not overly exposed in any single geography or dependency. It's about building resilience by design.
So wrapping this up, what does this all really mean for you listening in? We've seen the business world as less like that predictable running track and much more like a vast shifting ocean. CEOs are literally learning to surf these waves, balancing the immediate crises with that long-term vision. They're adopting new models like localization, grappling with risks way beyond just tariff things like national security, tech sovereignty.
Yeah, and if you connect the dots, the big picture is clear. Adaptability, foresight, and just a much more nuanced grasp of these tangled political and economic forces. They aren't optional anymore. They are absolutely essential for survival, for growth. The old playbook for global business, it's pretty much been torn up and just, waiting for the fog to clear. That's not really a strategy anymore.
Okay, so this deep dive showed how leaders are fundamentally reevaluating pretty much everything: supply chains, R&D, market presence in this world of constant geopolitical flux. So maybe here's something for you, the listener, to think about. If national security and economic independence are getting so tightly tied to tech leadership, and we see this drive towards sovereign AI, sovereign clouds, how might that fundamentally reshape global innovation, global collaboration, over the next decade? Could we see more technological fragmentation? Or maybe new kinds of alliances forming? What unexpected opportunities or maybe challenges does that create for businesses and maybe even for individuals navigating their careers? Definitely something to ponder as you navigate your own journey.